Well, hello everyone, and thank you for being here. We really appreciate the level of attention that you're giving to this subject today. My name is Steve Kenny. I'm a 20-year Port Hueneme resident and an economic development consultant that was hired by the city earlier this year to try and help devise some new ways of the city gaining more revenue from the general fund, which we know has its problems, and revenue generation's always a challenge, and so we're always looking for new ways and new ideas. So that's my role. I'm joined here by Police Chief Andrew Salinas and by the city's Deputy Community Development Director, Tony Stewart, and by Tom Harris, who is under contract to the city to handle all of the building plan check. So he's here as an expert if those kind of nitty-gritty building questions come up. I'd also like to recognize Councilmember Will Berg down there, who decided to come here tonight and watch the proceedings. So I want to tell you first, at that end of the room are restrooms. At that end of the room are refreshments, at least some water, and a plate of brownies. Now I will tell you that my wife made the brownies, so I can attest that they are both legal and very tasty. So help yourself while they last. Okay, well, I think we'll get started then. And we're up here to say a few words to you. Really want to make it as few words as possible, because the whole point of this afternoon's meeting is to answer the questions that are in your minds. And we can't anticipate all those in advance. So let us lay out a few facts for you to set the stage, and then as soon as we can, we will get to all the questions that you want to ask. If you could hold your questions until we're done, and again, I hope that won't take too long, and then we'll dive into the questions head first, okay? So let me start just to set the stage with sort of the bigger picture. And the bigger picture goes back to what I alluded to earlier: the general fund, the revenue problems of the city, the search for new and creative sources of revenue to get the general fund balanced so that we can continue to enjoy the level of services and protection that the city offers to us now. That's a real challenge, and that's one of the reasons that the City Council earlier this year decided to take a very serious look at cannabis uses as a potential revenue stream to the general fund. And after an extensive period of time of investigation, research, public feedback, comments, expert testimony extending over 5 or 6 months with 5 or 6 meetings, the City Council finally arrived at an ordinance that they were comfortable would allow for cannabis uses in a controlled and protected way into the community, and they passed that ordinance just last week in final form. So the stage is set in Port Hueneme for cannabis licensees to begin to operate. And the licensees could include different forms of activity, ranging from manufacturing of edibles, for example, to the cultivation, growing of marijuana plants, to dispensaries, which I think most of us think of first when we think of marijuana uses. We think of the storefronts where people would go to buy their supplies. Delivery services, testing labs, those are all various facets of the cannabis industry in total. So those are theoretically all on stage for Port Hueneme. But there's also a very elaborate process that any prospective applicant or licensee will have to go through that will really extend over a period of many weeks, maybe months, in order to obtain that license. Now, that pertains to the community as a whole. I think tonight I want to be be sure that we focus our discussion on what you're interested in, which is this one building in particular down on Industrial Way. And the reason that that building is in the crosshairs tonight, so to speak, is because that's a city-owned property, one of a dozen or so that the city identified earlier this year as being surplus, or in other words, eligible to be sold for some sort of revenue generation. There are others around the city, and that's a subject for another meeting, another night. Tonight, we're looking at 746 Industrial Way and the potential sale by the city. And I think the expectation is, the reason we're all here with our questions, is because it's very likely that the sale will go to someone who wants to get a cannabis license. So the process that's involved is on the little handout here. And the reason it's all written down there is so I don't have to go through it with you here tonight. I don't want to see what all those steps are. We'd rather get to the more important matters. But it's there for you to look at and take with you for reference. There are just a couple things I want to point out in this several-step process that's involved. Number one, there are more than one occasions when approvals will have to be granted by the City Council for any licensee to proceed. So, this is hardly the last time you'll have a chance to gather together and discuss the cannabis-related issues. There are public hearings that will be scheduled at City Council meetings, the sole purpose of which is to receive neighborhood comments and concerns about whatever's being proposed at the time. So there's public input in several steps along the way, and then just sort of the bottom line, as I said there, you look for this process to take basically the rest of the year before anybody could be licensed and ready to operate, say at the building that we're talking about. So that's really all I want to say about the process. If it turns out that you've got some questions about that as we go along, that'll be fine, but I want to keep this moving along. So I want to turn now to Tony Stewart. Tony's in charge of the planning function in the city and the building side as well. So he's got a couple comments about things that you would expect to be of concern to planners and building folks. Tony.
Thanks, Steve. Thank you all for coming out this evening. Hopefully you guys can hear me. Like Steve said, I'm in charge of planning and building and safety, so I want to talk to you a little bit about our zoning ordinance and the requirements. First of all, as you probably know, this is an industrially zoned piece of property. So right off the bat, we're looking, or the city's looking for a tenant or an owner who is either a manufacturer, distributor, a warehouse type business. What is not allowed out there, though, are retail uses. So in other words, dispensaries are not allowed at this particular site. With regard to some of the development standards out there, I know I've seen a few questions as far as, the building height, and that is 2 stories or 35 feet. Setbacks are another issue because the property is surrounded by residential uses to the south and west. Setback requirements are actually greater for new development than what you see out there now. So any new development, say somebody wanted to put in a greenhouse or expand the existing building, setbacks to those residential properties need to be twice the building height. So for instance, if somebody wants to put up a 20-foot tall building, they have to be set back at least 40 feet from the property line. So it's quite a substantial setback that we require. There's also a buffer requirement, which is a 6-foot tall wall around the property. And then, of course, the future use is going to have to meet all of our other requirements with regard to parking, landscaping, etc. As Steve mentioned, there are a couple of different processes that the applicants will need to go through, at least a cannabis-related one. First is getting a certificate of approval from the city, but the second thing they need to do is get a conditional use permit for any type of cannabis use in the city. And what the conditional use permit process is, it's a public process. It does require city council approval, or at least final action. So Steve mentioned that is another process for you folks to come and basically have your say in. The nice thing about a conditional use permit is that it allows a lot more discretion for for staff and decision makers. We don't just rubber stamp something. Each conditional use permit is a separate, unique animal, and it also allows us, because of that, to provide additional conditions of approval. So, for instance, odor was something that some of you folks are concerned about with these businesses, rightfully so. So what we would do is we would condition the project to make sure that all of the odors were kept basically on site, that you couldn't smell them off site, otherwise they're in violation of the conditional use permit. It could be revoked at that point. Additional landscaping, for instance. I know that there were some concerns about can we see into the site from the units up above that are adjacent. And again, we could add requirements for additional landscaping, whatnot. So the conditional use permit process does allow the city's staff and decision makers to make sure that the ultimate business, no matter what it is, whether it's cannabis related or not, be more respective of the threat neighborhood. So that's basically about what I had that I want to add. Of our building official here to answer questions when we get to that point. If there's anything with regard to the conversion of the building to a different type of use than what's out there right now. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Steve and then the chief.
Thanks. Security has to be at the forefront of anybody's concern. And we've got just the right man to talk about that tonight. Our new police chief, been on the job maybe 3 months here, so many of you may not have had a chance to meet Andrew before, but we're very happy to have Andrew Salinas as our chief of police, and on to hear his presentation.
I don't need the microphone unless there's someone in here that can't hear me. All right. So welcome everyone. My name is Andrew Salinas. I am the chief of police for the city of Port Hueneme. I have been here for the last 3 months. I know you guys are all here to see me. Thank you for coming. Just to get a show of hands, how many people actually got a flyer from an Explorer this weekend? Please raise your hand. Okay, Steve, you owe me. Where are you at? Good. All right, the plan works. So we did want to get the word out. We didn't want anyone to feel like they didn't know about this meeting. And so we did hit all of the surrounding neighborhoods here to make sure that everybody was aware of this meeting, because we want the information to be out there. We want to be as transparent as possible. So we're here today to talk about just 746 Industrial Way. And that's a location. Of course, it doesn't. That's the location right here with Mark Starr, which is right off of Surfside, 746 Industrial Way. It is a city-owned property, and that's why we're here today. Here's an overhead Google Earth map view. Here's the border, the perimeter of the property. It is surrounded by anywhere from a 6 to 8 foot wall. And here, some of you have not seen, here's the front of the location, which currently shows it as a public works building here in the city of Port Hueneme. Okay, why are we here? We're here to talk about this location because an ordinance just recently passed here in the city of Port Hueneme that goes into effect July 5th. What does that mean? That means there are going to be several people that are going to be putting in for the, as Steve Kinney mentioned, for the property at 746 Industrial Way, specifically a manufacturing license or permit. We're here to answer all of your questions or concerns. This is the time to ask them so that we can let you know exactly what's going on, so you walk away from this meeting not knowing what's happening. Okay, and you all received the flyers, and this meeting is absolutely open to the public. Okay, why this location? As mentioned by Tony Stewart, because of the zoning. This is the only place that we can sell this piece of property and actually allow the usage or manufacturing of marijuana. And it allows it to be nowhere near a school within 600 feet. And a reminder, this is for medicinal marijuana only, not recreational. The requirements are a lot more stringent when you're dealing with the manufacturing of medical marijuana.